Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar on how to stand out with authentic threat response capabilities. If you are familiar with D3, you would know that we oftentimes address MSSPs in our messaging on different blogs that we put out, and we work with MSSPs across the world to essentially help them stand out, help them be more profitable, help them automate in a smarter manner. And the proof of that is essentially the business outcomes that we're able to drive for our MSSP customers. So I'm really delighted that you're able to make time to join us today. Before we get started, I want to touch upon a few housekeeping rules. So the webinar today will be recorded and it will be available on demand. We'll have a live Q&A session at the end where you can ask questions to myself, Pierre, and Tony. Tony Ubi is the CEO of VerSprite, and he is from an MSSP organization. They've done some incredible work, and Tony will be sharing highlights of that in this webinar. You're encouraged to ask questions. If you have questions while the speakers are still going through the presentation, I would encourage you to type them in the chat, either at that point in time or later on during the Q&A. As always, we reward the audience member with the best question with a $50 gift voucher, and we have many gift vouchers. So if there are really good questions that come our way, we will gladly be delighted and honored to present more than one person with a gift voucher. So without any further ado, Tony, thank you for joining the webinar today. I would ask you to please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Mardeep. Pleasure to be here. Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with Pierre and share the stage. We're going to talk about a lot of great content here. A little bit about myself. I am, as mentioned, the CEO at VerSprite. I have, roughly about 25 years of ITIS experience, having worked both enterprise and on the consulting side. So VerSprite is, as mentioned, an MSSP. We do global cybersecurity services for multinational companies as well as startups all around the world. We're known for our adversarial engagements and thinking very much like an adversarial threat actor so that we can better protect a lot of our clients in multiple different vertical markets. We're also known for a book that I co-authored in 2015. It's called Risk-Centric Threat Modeling. You can find it on Amazon. It was with Wiley Life Sciences, and it depicts a process called PASTA that we're going to talk about today. And that is an acronym that stands for the Process for Attack Simulation and Threat Analysis. And in terms of defense and threat response, it provides a game-changing framework for us as analysts to be able to contextualize a lot of things for our clients. And we'll get into that in a moment. And last but not least, I am also the OWASP chapter leader for the past roughly 16 years here in the Atlanta area. And I'm also the vice chair of the pen testing subcommittee for CREST in London. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And I'm sure everyone is looking forward to hearing about what you have to say. I know that I have witnessed some of the things that you do to keep the team engaged at VerSprite. And I know that making pasta in the kitchen is also one of your passions. So maybe later on in the Q&A, we can talk about that as well.
Absolutely.
But over to Pierre now. Pierre, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Amardeep, and pleasure to be here. I'm a product marketing manager here at D3. I worked for a while on the implementation side, mainly with MSSPs. So I helped them implement SOAR from the ground up. I worked with the small MSSPs just getting started to some international ones as well. I'm also on the advisory board for the Canadian Cybersecurity Network. And so we're up here helping connect technical needs with the talent that has the skills to solve them. So yeah, looking forward to demonstrating how the D3 SOAR platform can help MSSPs and complements the threat intelligence and security services of Tony and the VerSprite team.
Excellent. Tony, over to you today.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive in, everyone. So we're going to begin with talking about inherent challenges for MSSPs today. As mentioned, VerSprite is a global MSSP, and what I want to be sharing on the screen here is really no surprise to anyone that's out there. You know, there are some serious challenges in being an MSSP today and fulfilling a lot of the cybersecurity requests for a lot of your customers, whether they be small SMBs or actually large multinational corporations. So some of the challenges in building out a practice is that, okay, there's obviously a challenge in finding the right cybersecurity talent. And then in addition to not having enough resources to, live that life of 24/7, on demand, on call, pager duty, et cetera, you have an ever-changing IT environment, right? The environments that we're asked to monitor as an MSSP keeps changing. These are dynamic IT times, and they're far different from the more static IT environments that I grew up with in the 80s and the 90s. That you have a lot of decentralization, you have a lot of third-party embedded, and you have a lot of changes, in terms of when IT refreshments actually happen. So what we want to do is, and then the last thing there from an MSSP standpoint is the overwhelming amount of data. There's a lot of data. So how do you build a team that is going to be adequate enough to be able to respond to massive amounts of data? Now, let's take a look at the next slide and take a look at some of these challenges in the data, right? So if we look at traditional aspects, and I have it here listed here, threat data, the frenemy of the SOC, right? It's a friend because it's useful for triaging, right? By triaging, mean like obviously analyzing events that come in. But it's also an enemy because there's so much of it. If you look at that top of the funnel there on the left, you have raw events that come in, and this is where we really need the right technology. Unfortunately, in security industry, we have had evolutionary SIM products that have done a good job to provide, improve correlation, and improve analytics and things like that. But we still, need to come down to the actual analysis and most important, the decision making. And we're going to talk, especially show some of the automation capabilities where decisioning can be programmed through the product at D3, the D3 SOAR. But context is everything. At VerSprite, we do a lot of threat modeling, organizational threat modeling, and application threat modeling. And this helps to contextualize who is the threat actor possibly, what threat attributions do we know about the event, what is the source of the event, what is the affected area, right? All these things really are important so that we don't just take a decision as a SOC analyst from what a tool is telling us, right? But actually with greater context. So let's go to the next slide really quick. Now, what we do at VerSprite, just this as a slide, kind of shows a differentiator that maybe some other MSSPs might be interested in emulating. Because again, and I've been a SOC analyst before, I've been a NOC and a SOC analyst doing first, second, third shift, the overnight shift. You want to be able to take those alerts that come to you on screen, right? And to be able to contextualize it. What is this event for in terms of an asset, an affected node on my network, on my attack surface? Is this affected node critical in terms of business criticality? Is there an associated vulnerability with this particular event? Is there a ease of access in order to be able to maybe do some level of exploitation? These types of contextual things are depicted in this methodology called PASTA, where it's 7 stages. And once you learn the 7 stages, as an analyst, you can quickly apply, some of the generic principles of each stage to the event that comes your way, right? Overall, the threat modeling methodology, stage 4 is one of my favorite stages of the PASTA methodology because it allows the analyst to say, what is the threat library of threats that I am applying to the environment that I'm monitoring? Maybe I'm monitoring a bank or a credit union, or maybe a healthcare institution or clinic. there's going to be different types of inherent impacts that you're concerned about. Maybe it's confidentiality, maybe it's integrity of data, maybe it's connectivity you have with third-party service providers, or the overall availability, right? Once you see an event, you have to qualify it and say, does this affect any of the, what we call the CIACC, confidentiality, integrity, availability, connectivity, or regulatory compliance of what I'm supposed to be monitoring? So in just in simply, there's a lot to unpack here. And this webinar is really not about this, but I just wanted to exemplify and say that threat models do help to contextualize for automation. And we're going to get to a little bit more on that later on, but let's go to the next slide really quick. So a simplified explanation, just to kind of simplify, if you look at the kind of the decision tree on the right, this is a normal process that seems pretty intuitive for if you get something that comes across as an event or an incident. You want to be able to look at information to see how it reconciles to a threat library that you build. A threat library that you build for your organization might be concerned with, I'm concerned about being extorted. I'm concerned about someone being persistent in my environment. I'm concerned about someone stealing my employee credentials, et cetera, et cetera. So you build this threat library and it adds like an umbrella so you can determine how you want to triage and move forward with how you prepare, plan, and prioritize a lot of these events. At the end of the day, being an MSSP and being called to do 24/7 threat response means that we have to do both event and incident analysis. So with event analysis, these are things that could be an incident or it could be nothing, right? It could be a false positive. It could be just simply normal traffic that's misconstrued. But it's our job to be able to reconcile these types of things and to see if there is, a true positive, or even worse, a false negative, which means that something wasn't called out as a problem or an incident, but there actually is a problem, right? And of course, incident analysis, the whole adage of if not, it's not a matter of if, but when, really comes into, especially as we see the past couple of weeks here in 2023, now in October, so many different major incidents and breaches that have taken place. Being able to quickly examine and respond, and this is where the SOAR aspect is going to be really key, but being able to contextualize this information in a threat library is such a game changer for us at VerSprite as an MSSP. But let's go to the next slide really quick. Okay, so many in the security industry may have heard of these different taxonomies that are out there. One of them is from MITRE, which is an organization in Maryland that is supported largely and funded by DHS and NSA and some other types of organizations, where their job is to help educate government agencies and overall the public domain on what are attack patterns that are happening. Now, this is another game changer that has been really effective, that a lot of technology, especially with SOAR platforms, can actually you can map to, right? So you have in the attack framework, it's a listing of attack patterns. And in threat modeling, if you want to explore PASTA and threat modeling a little bit more, this provides the opportunity to say what types of attacks are out there and how do those types of attacks map to the threat library that I'm going to create for my environment that I'm monitoring, so that when you have alerts pop up and events and incidents that you're triaging, you can determine, wait a minute, this is a recon type of tactic, or this is a defense evasion around EDR evasion, type of event that's happening. And you can see if that type of attack or post-exploitation attack maps the MO, missions and objectives of that threat, right? And if it does, now you have a good formula to create maybe some automation in some of the tools that D3 has with their SOAR platform. For more information on really contextualization, now we talked about attack patterns. What you're looking here on the right in that infographic is a beautiful work of art originally from MITRE, actually. It was basically STIX. It was a structured threat information exchange protocol. It was then given to the OASIS group. It's another institution that they have taken on to try to maintain this particular project. But what I love about this framework is that it allows a company and an MSSP to be able to look at incidents and event patterns that are happening in the environment and to say, is this something that I can reconcile to incident data feeds that I'm getting through my threat intel? Is this something that maybe has an indicator of a compromise because I'm seeing a malicious hash? Is this reconciling to properties underneath the domain of TTPs, which are techniques and tactics that adversarial groups or threat actors, another domain, are using, right? It's important from an MSSP to be able to espouse at least one, two, ideally all of these, but some of them are a little bit more complicated than others, so that at the very least, if you look at the incident domain, if you're recognizing an incident, being able to recognize like the indicators of compromise that are tied to an actual incident would give you the necessary confidence when building out automation in a security orchestration and automation reporting platform such as D3's product. So for us, that's been the case, right? When we are monitoring and we are looking at events, we first build our organizational threat model for our customers. And then as we look at events and incidents that pop up, we have that opportunity to say, okay, does this particular type of incident match a threat objective in our threat library, so that we can go ahead and have confidence in that automation playbook that we're creating? And Pierre's going to talk, greater in depth about that, about those automation playbooks here shortly. Next slide, please. Okay, so related to some of the things that I talked about, it all comes down to operational response. Let's take it back. Let's do we're going to transition here shortly to Pierre. But I wanted to be able to talk as an MSSP, leveraging the D3 SOAR platform in terms of some of the benefits, right? For us at VerSprite, we are doing organizational threat models to first define a library of threats that are not unilaterally based on our opinions, but threat intel inspired, research, etc. We come up with a library of threats. We reconcile that to taxonomies like that, such as the attack framework from MITRE, to say, what attack patterns exist that support these threats? Or maybe what types of threat actors or other types of threat attributions correlate to this types of threat that we can identify, so that when we see an alert or an incident, we can have confidence in the playbook, one automation playbook running automatically. So let's take a couple of examples. So on the screen there, you see kind of a snapshot there of phishing as an attack vector. And phishing is an attack. It's not a threat. You fish, pH fish, for the purposes of doing impersonation, for purposes of being able to introduce a malicious link, maybe a malicious attachment, maybe because you want persistence. That's a threat. Maybe because you want to steal sensitive information. That's a threat, right? So this is an example where we're matching attack patterns to our threat. And what we need, going back to the first slide, is to be able to scale, right? So we want to be able to look at, and that's a great transition there, if you don't mind going to the tree there. We want to be able to build this library and this tree for every library that we have in our threat library. Here we're looking at one threat, account compromise. What are the attacks and the vulnerabilities and the affected components or the attack patterns that would be fired off, right? So when we're feeding into our SOAR, if we find, for example, vulnerabilities that are attached to a particular node that we're monitoring, we can say, aha, this particular vulnerability actually matches to a component in my attack tree that it relates to a threat that I actually care about. What this does for us at VerSprite is that it helps us to be able to determine which types of things do we want to develop automation playbooks for, and which types of things don't we want to do it. Because you can't create automation for absolutely everything, because some things might be a little bit more conducive to having some challenges in that automation, right? So with that, let's go to the next slide. And I think we're going to now transition to Pierre, who's going to now talk a little bit about the SOAR platform. So Pierre, I'm going to give it to you, and I'm going to go on mute for a little bit.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tony. Yeah, so SOAR comes in and helps with the incident response component of MSSP services. Many MSSPs have to deal with multiple tenants, multiple different alert queues, multiple different detection sources. And so the first benefit of deploying a SOAR tool is you get to consolidate all of those alerts into a single platform. The reason why D3 is able to do this is because we are completely vendor agnostic. We're not owned by a larger security company, so we don't favor certain tools over other tools. It makes sure that our MSSP partners have the best integrations for the widest possible number of tools. And we do all of the integration development for our clients. So that means that our clients, they don't have to read through API documentation. They don't have to write hundreds of lines of code. They don't have to test it and then deploy it into production and monitor it as it runs. We do all of that ourselves. So this saves our clients hundreds of hours. Additionally, we're able to run reporting and analytics on all of your security activities within our SOAR platform. So we have a fully built out reporting and analytics module. These can be used for internal reporting purposes. These can be used for audit reports. These can be used for sending metrics to your clients so that they understand the work you're doing. They understand the patterns going on in their environments. So it's a very comprehensive SOAR platform. And the final feature that makes D3 specifically helpful for MSSPs, and that is unique to the D3 Smart SOAR platform, is the client portal. And so what the client portal is essentially a ticketing system that is also integrated with the playbook engine. So if there's an incident that your team is reviewing and they need feedback from a client, they can push the ticket out to the client portal. The client can log in, they can review the details, they can determine how they want to respond to it, they can approve or deny certain reactions, and then those answers are recorded back in the original Smart SOAR incident. And that can trigger playbook workflows. And so it's just a better integration in that way. And so we offer this as well as part of the SOAR package. And yeah, on the next slide, I'll get into a little bit more about automated response for this particular use case. And so on the other side of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is a popular model for understanding adversaries, is MITRE DEFEND. And so MITRE DEFEND is relatively new, but it hasn't really been operationalized. And the reason why is because it's difficult to follow a consistent framework. It's difficult to follow a consistent methodology for every alert that comes in, especially if a security team isn't trained in it and they don't think in terms of this particular framework, then it's not going to come naturally to them to go ahead and follow it step by step. And although this may be a best practice, if no one on the team is following the protocol, then no one's going to enforce it either. So what I wanted to demonstrate today is how you can tune a SOAR playbook so that it follows some of these frameworks. And so your team, you can trust that every incident that comes in, every alert that's ingested is going to be processed and handled in a way that is recommended or in kind of a best practice kind of way. And so I'll just jump right into, well, actually, so the MITRE DEFEND framework has 6 stages: model, harden, detect, isolate, deceive, and evict. SOAR typically helps with the latter half, which is the actual response piece. The initial half is usually done by some threat tooling and then manual work going into hardened devices. And so in this demonstration, I'll show you a playbook for a brute force attack that does this isolation, deception, and eviction for this incident. So I can jump into the demonstration now. Okay, you should all be able to see my my screen right here.
Yes, your screen's coming up now.
Okay, so what we're looking at right now is the monitoring dashboard right here. This is a trend of all of the different tactics and techniques that are being observed in this particular environment. And here I have it over the past half year, and we can see what kind of threats we're seeing an increase and decrease in. This is as it relates to events in the platform. And the second tier of alert is an incident inside of Smart SOAR. And so here what we'll be looking at is this increase in brute force technique seen here up 100%. And so what I'm going to go is I'm going to go to the investigation dashboard. And this is our list of all active incidents. You can see I have it here organized by open, by decreasing severity, and then also grouped by technique. And so this is a really easy way for analysts to come in and see exactly what needs to be worked on, and not only what needs to be worked on, but how they need to work on it. So if we scroll down here, I'll go down to the brute force password guessing technique. I see there's one open alert here. And when I open it up, I'm going to be taken into the incident overview. And so this is where the team does a lot of their work. At the top level here is summary data about the incident, as well as here on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side here is the original alert that generated this incident. If we click on view details and event log, we can see the raw data that came from Microsoft Sentinel. So back out into the incident ticket, we can see that it's been tagged as a brute force attack here. And behind the scenes, we have this playbook running. So I'll walk through the playbook structure and then we can kind of process the ticket. But these orange tasks denote different stages. So you can see here, this is the isolation stage, this is the deception stage, and then eviction here. So in the isolation stage, what we're doing first is we're getting in all of the necessary data that we need in order to contextualize this alert. And then the user is given the option to block the IP addresses or not that are trying to make this, this inauthentic login attempt. Once we've processed that, it moves into deception. So we're going to use Azure Active Directory to create a false user and add them to a honeypot group. And then it's going to do two things. It branches off in a couple different ways here. One branch goes directly to the eviction stage if you want to proceed with that right away. The other branch kicks off a loop. So it waits an hour and then monitors this new user that we've created in that group for any sign-in attempts. If they are not detected, it'll add an increment. And then if a week hasn't passed, it'll go back and it'll start the loop again. So this will run for a week. And then if after a week there's no suspicious sign-in detected, it'll close the incident. If at any point it is detected, it'll notify us over Teams, and then we'll move into the eviction stage. So before we actually take action on this incident, what's important is to go into the investigation tab here and see all of the data that's been added by the playbook. So here initially what we're seeing is some data enrichment. So we can see information on the user that's been affected or the particular account that's been targeted here. We can see the job title and the different groups that they're a part of. Down here, we can see the log on, log off activity. So the username, the timestamp, the IP address of the device, the IP address of the request, and the location of the request. So we can see here that these two failed login attempts look like they're starting to actually target this user. And here we've taken those source IPs and we've ran them through some open source intelligence. And we figured out that these don't look pretty good. So we're going to go into the playbook here. We can see that the initial task here that is open for us to run has these IP addresses populated in it. If we want to block them, we can hit run. And then the rest of the playbook will trigger. So now that this is going to go in, it's going to block the IPs on our firewall. We're going to move into the deception stage. The playbook will go in and create that user in Active Directory, and it'll go and add that user to that group there. And so now we can move into the eviction stage if we want. I won't do that right away. But that was just a quick overview of how you can ingest an alert into D3. We can tag it as a MITRE tactic and technique. And then you can always have a playbook behind the scenes that's designed for this specific incident type. And so this is really the benefit of using a SOAR platform, is being able to create a structured approach to your incident response, make sure that your team is following best practices, and also take away all of the manual work in executing this. So VerSprite and other MSSPs are now using this kind of a playbook, can now serve, 3 to 4x the number of clients that they can serve if they were, working on tickets individually and they're following a framework like MITRE. And so that wraps up my demonstration of the platform. And so Amardeep, I can hand it back to you to round us off.
Thanks so much, Pierre and Tony. I'm going to share my screen once again, and let's see what's coming up next. I think it's time for the Q&A. Okay, so I did receive a few questions on chat. These questions are mostly directed at Tony, so I'm just going to read them out. So Tony, the first question for you is that when did you know that it's time to get a SOAR platform?
Well, when I knew that throwing humans at a problem of trying to keep up with, true positive alerts wasn't really cutting it. And then in addition to that, we were flirting with, limits in our SLA, service level agreements, where we had to be able to think of, more effective ways to be able to respond more intelligently. And so, with SOAR, it's been a game changer. To be able to look at types of things that we know that conclusively, if we have all the information and we see that there is a certain type of attack that's happening for one of our clients, to be able to build a playbook that goes through and does some initial level of actions and then, breaks to the point where has a pause, better said, to the point where the analyst is called in to make that further decisioning is phenomenal. What it does is it helps to catalyze our processes as an MSSP. But that realization point really was when we had some challenges in scaling. And so with that, we started shopping, and we had a chance to meet with multiple different SOAR technology providers, and we landed with D3, for a lot of different reasons: culture, technology, direction, etc.
Okay. How has D3 helped you be more profitable?
Well, definitely. I mean, if we didn't go the SOAR route, we would have done what most traditional MSPs and SOCs do, is to add, more humans to the problem. And now in this day and age, there's global resources that have definitely changed the cost model of those resources. But in saving time, for us, time is money. So if we're able to provide a faster response, a quicker response that is accurate to our customers, and it's largely automated through the platform, then we are able to save our operational costs because we have a lot of this stuff that is automatically being done through the technology. So we're saving time, and that allows our resources to be less fatigued and to save their energies for analytical things that they really need to be focused on.
Thank you, Tony. And our next question is from someone who's actually identified themselves as a new MSSP. So it says, we're a new MSSP, and do your customers see a clear difference in working with you due to your tech stack?
That's a great question. Oftentimes, so what we do provide a lens to our customers into the SOAR platform. We feel that transparency is really important. Number one, because of the value proposition that they're getting, right? At first, our customers really want that assurance that there's going to be someone to respond proactively when there's something goes bump in the night. And before, we didn't actually have that transparency, but with the SOAR platform, we want them to have that lens so that they can appreciate the automation that is there. So it's definitely helped us to be able to show a higher level of value add. I know that in multiple other conversations that we've had customers explicitly say this was a decision maker that was above and beyond the other criteria from some of the other choices that our customers had. So that was very helpful, right? To be able to know that the overall presentation and the overall execution of what we have, both as a team of service providers, but also in terms of the back-end technology, easily has made us to be able to have a greater cost reduction and client retention and new client obtainment. So
thank you for answering that, Tony. The next question is from somebody who chose to remain anonymous. The question is the SOAR platform built per endpoint or data volume?
Well, I can try to answer that, and then Pierre, if you want, you can jump in. So there's an architecture of how SOAR really is attached to a broader ecosystem of security products that are providing what's called data telemetry. And so data telemetry means that simply you have good visibility into all of the endpoints that are in your IT environment. And there are some dependencies on being able to make sure that you have, things downstream in your IT environment at your laptop level, at your EC2 level in the cloud, et cetera, that are communicating into a log aggregator. And then, from there into a tool like D3, where you can really focusing on automation and reporting. So I would say the answer is both, from my standpoint, because, at the, indirectly, a lot of those nodes are feeding into a log aggregator or into a SIM. And one of the things that I like about D3 as a company is and this is a major criteria, was the level of integrations, right? The amount of integrations that D3 has, to support, name your product, or whether it be SolarWinds, whether it be, Cisco products, or, Splunk, also now Cisco, or, Stellar or other, products like that, is definitely super important. Now, the node-based information is feeding, into those other types of integration points. D3's responsibility as a technology leader has been to be always on the forefront of playing catch up or really thinking ahead and making sure that their breadth of coverage for those integrations are there for MSSPs like VerSprite and others. So I would say, it's not an either or, but an and. But that's my take. I don't know if Pierre has some additional anecdotal information there.
No, nothing anecdotally. I just wanted to mention from the D3's point of view is that we build to the MSSP customer based on number of users in the product. And then it's completely up to the MSSP how they want to then transfer that cost over to the client. So by endpoint, by data volume, up to them. And then in terms of D3 as a technology provider, there's a base license fee and then an incremental cost per user in the platform. So we don't charge for the like data storage or ingestion or automation tasks or number of playbooks or anything like that. It's just the number of users in the platform.
Thank you both for answering that. I can see, like Tony, and Pierre, both of you are looking through different lenses. So your perspective is equally rich and important in both those cases. Like we are here to help MSSPs grow. That's our mission. So the next question is, when does the size of a client and the cost of the product not make sense? I think, Tony, we would request you to take the first stab at that.
Well, I haven't really seen that our team has been affected by, typically large multinational companies. We work with both large Fortune 500s that typically have their own, SOC and SIM and sometimes a SOAR. We are seeing that a lot of multinational corporations are playing catch up, but typically they want to have some level of self-control in that. So I would say, the criteria for that is going to be really comes down to client processes. So if the client themselves have resources to be able to do a lot of this stuff, on their own, and there isn't that level of there's going to be some level of inefficiency of the client environment integrating with us as an MSSP, then sometimes it doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that our clients are not going to be unaware of threats that are going to be ongoing and pervasive in their overall attack surface. Because if that does happen, it's both, negative PR on them as well as it's a negative impact on us, right? We drop the ball. So it's important for us to be able to make sure that beyond the technology, beyond the scope of amount of nodes that are feeding into, the automation playbooks that we define and design, it has to come down to, to overall culture and integration. And I think that's really kind of a misunderstood X factor. As an MSSP, and I'm the CEO of VerSprite. So obviously, like any CEO out there that might be listening to this, you might be concerned about profitability and business growth and things like that. But you're going to find out that if there isn't that cultural fit with your particular customer, where operationally your MSSP, processes are integrating well, it might actually be something that is going to be much more expensive for you to operate, and it might not be worth, the overall partnership, so to speak. So that would be, my 2 cents on that.
Okay, we're going to take one last question. And the question is, how do you operationalize your processes across multiple customers using D3?
That's an excellent question. So there's going to be unique playbooks, right? So, with each particular customer that we have as an MSSP, and this, I think this is pretty generic in general, is that you're going to have, unique tenancy, unique threat library. This is, again, what we do at VerSprite, is to be able to think about the organizational threats that are affecting our customers, and then to define where does automation make sense. Typically, our criteria for automation is going to be things that definitively we're going to consistently see that it's a problem, so we want that immediate response time. We don't fall into the trap at VerSprite to be able to say that what's good for one customer of ours is good for another. So there's unique threat models, and I use this example all the time. So MRD, Pierre, and myself, we're spread out across North America here. And the threat model for our individual lives are very unique. And this is the same thing to corporations and businesses that you're monitoring as an MSSP. So for that reason, it's really important to make sure that you have unique playbooks. Now, there might be, and that's important that for operationally, as you train your MSSP team members, that they recognize, that they are looking at unique businesses, unique environments. That's the part that I think threat modeling really adds that glue, right? If you can train your team members within your MSSP team to be able to understand that unique organizational threat library for your customer, that's really the anchor that helps define the unique playbooks and the unique approach and operational procedures that you have for your customer. At the end of the day, it's going to be industry, attack surface, which is, affected nodes or nodes in the environment that are being monitored, regulatory aspects, and then, overall threat intel, right? Those 4 things are basic things that can help you to define a unique approach for how you're going to define unique playbooks for your various customers.
Thank you, Tony, for answering that. And thank you to both yourself and Pierre for being with us today, for answering all these questions, and for sharing these excellent nuggets of wisdom with our esteemed guests. We really appreciate it. This has been an excellent use of my time, and I'm sure everybody else who joined the session will gain immense value from your insights. So thanks again, Tony and Pierre. If you want to switch on your cameras and bid adieu to our audience.
Yeah, pleasure being
Thanks,
here.
everyone.
Thanks, Mardeep. Great sharing the stage with you, Pierre. A lot of great information.
Likewise.
And again, the DEFEND framework that you alluded to is as you mentioned, an evolving framework that we expect the industry to really see a lot more of. And we do use it as a bottom kind of like level of countermeasures to map to some of the attack patterns that are out there. So definitely, it was great to see that reference there. But Amardeep, thanks for putting this together, and hope to see you guys in the next conference somewhere worldwide.
Thanks, Tony.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tony. Pleasure.
Hey, everybody.